And beginning with Pesach, the second day of Pesach to Shavuot, tradition teaches we're supposed to count those 49 days. According to the Kabbalists, it connects Passover to the receiving of Torah Matan Torah at Mount Sinai, where the Israelites counted every day with excitement. As a reminder, if we count each day, we make every day count. I'd like to invite all who are able to please rise in body and or in spirit for Sfirat Omer, for the counting of the Omer. We read together, I am ready to fulfill the mitzvah of counting the Omer. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu al Sfirat HaOmer. Hayom sheni yamim la'omer. Today is 2 days of the Omer. You may be seated. And on Pesach, we are reminded of our ancestors' great journey going from slavery through redemption to freedom, from Egypt ultimately to the land of Canaan, later Israel. And so tonight we're going to hear a story similar to the Exodus story, but also very different as well, commemorating our people's journey from, unfortunately, Eastern Europe during time of great tragedy to our rise again as a people. And so we're going to invite up our very own Honorable Larry Gendler to come up and share a little bit about his journey on March of the Living. Larry, the congregation is all yours. No gavel needed.
I'm just going to reshare.
Okay. Can I just hit this
You
thing?
should be able to just...
Which one do I hit? That one, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to thank the clergy for this opportunity, and Shabbat Shalom. And
Shabbat Shalom.
About a year ago, I went on March of the Living with my two sons, which was really the biggest blessing in my life. I want to give you a little history of why I went, because we all shared as part of that journey in small groups. My grandparents, my Bubby and Zadie, lived in Shemsk, Poland. My grandfather was born in 1889. He lived to be 102 and was one of my best friends. The Red Army came through Shemsk in 1917 and demanded that my Bubby cook the officers a meal, which she did. Afterwards, they wanted to cut her hands off as a commemoration of the dinner, which was a bargaining chip. Her family had already left and gone to Chicago, and my grandfather didn't want to leave. He reluctantly did. They had 4 children there at the time. One had passed, and they came to Omaha because Rabbi Grodzinski sponsored them, and my Zadie became a sheikhet, had a kosher slaughter, ritual slaughter. And people in town referred to him as Reverend Gendler. In the old country, it was Hafen Gendler. That was the name. On their way to the United States, they stopped in Amsterdam. And he reached in his pocket when they got off the boat, and the money that he had was gone. He didn't know what to do. On the way back to the boat with his wife and 3 children, on the ground was money. And that was a sign to him that Hashem said this is the right thing to do. So I mention that because there's going to be several coincidences that occurred on this trip that reminded me of him, and I wondered what he would say. When I had tragedy in my life, and when we talked a little bit about tragedy around the world, he would always say, you can't argue with the man upstairs. That was his only answer to me. I would walk to, as he said, Shiel, every Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur when I came back from college in 1975 until he passed. Never once would he talk about what happened to his family. We talked about lots of other things, but never that. So we met there are 8,000 people at this particular event. We were broken up into roughly groups of 25. So we're at a hotel. We get there. We walk into this room where there's 25 people, and immediately Max goes and hugs somebody who's roughly his age. And I can't figure out what is going on. He was friends with her brother at Osrui. So we all share these stories. I got to be very close with a family, the Perry and Nathan Rosen. His father was in the underground for the War of Independence in 1948, and there's a wing in a museum in Tel Aviv named after his dad. I'm going to actually see them next month. This was us, after we introduced ourselves and talked about why we were there. This is one of the few pictures where we're smiling. This was one of the, we did a walking tour, and we're in Krakow, by the way. This was the removed synagogue, and it's a museum and also used as a synagogue. This was another one that we went to. And then here's one more. So we did that as a group of 25. And then we go to the Jewish Community Center that's been resurrected in Krakow. And that Jewish Community Center exists because at the time, Prince Charles, now King Charles, gave the money to make sure it would open up. We go down to the social hall, roughly 150 people. This is our first big meal there. And Nate runs up, my other son Nate, and hugs somebody. What's this about? Somebody he met through BBYO who actually helped manage that Jewish Community Center. So already, in the first day, I've got two coincidences that are something higher than me is making this happen. The boys went out on the town that night with some, they met some people in our group that were roughly their age. So I wandered around and I came upon this, which was my first hint that Poland has gone the extra mile to protect Judaism. This was a bar, but they kept kosher cafe outside the door. And wherever you went, you found Hebrew. You found Jewish institutions that might have been destroyed, that have been resurrected. They're really making the effort to protect Judaism. This was across from that cafe, and this is what I took the next morning. It's called the Ghetto Heroes Square, and this is a memorial to the Jews' lives that were lost in Krakow. The empty chairs and the whole environment is just to remind you of what happened. This is a picture of us in front of Schindler's factory before we're getting ready to leave on the bus for the trip. And that's the last time we're smiling for a while. We came upon this as part of the trip. This is Jan Koski. There's also one in Warsaw. He was a courier for the Polish underground. He actually snuck into the Warsaw ghetto and reported that to the world. Unfortunately, the world didn't do enough. But he's revered in Poland, not just by Jews, but by their entire community. This is the entrance to Auschwitz. We were there the day before the march, and I'll have pictures of the march as well. And by the way, I'm not showing you pictures that you've already seen. I'm just going to show you some things that were meaningful for us. This was an area where they executed people. And I apologize, some of this is going to be hard for me to talk about. These are the alleys that lead through the buildings in Auschwitz, because Auschwitz wasn't just a death camp, it was an administration camp. And those that were lucky enough to survive had to work in some of these buildings. And I cannot imagine, honestly, what they went through. I had to take this picture because these are the steps in one of those buildings. And I tried to imagine who had to walk up and down those steps and what happened to them. This was a room that was roughly 25 feet by 50 feet with pages hanging from poles on either side listing the names of those that perished, roughly 1.1 million. Max is wearing the cap, and he's just looking to see if there's any names. I've done as much genealogy research as I can. There were 5 brothers in my dad's family, all 5 enlisted, all 4 went overseas, including my dad. They all made it home. My dad's oldest brother was Chuck, who was an aide to Eisenhower towards the end of the war. He had been given permission by the Allies to go into Poland to see if there were any survivors, but he was stopped by the Russians. But the Russians did confirm that my grandfather's family, my Zadie's family, had perished. these are the grounds of Birkenau. And Birkenau wasn't exactly an administration camp. That's just where you were murdered. As you can see there are supports on those buildings. They do what they can to preserve what's left. I want you to, this is an important picture because of what I'll show you later, but the building that you see is the entrance to Birkenau. And Birkenau and Auschwitz are part of a campus. It's roughly a mile walk from the entrance at Auschwitz to Birkenau. And those are the tracks that lead to the administration building. So where I'm standing is roughly where the chambers and where some of the horrors took place. Coincidence number 3. The boys and I are walking along these tracks, and I hear somebody yell, "Max." A woman roughly his age who he met through Osrui. She was there with another group. This is the beginning of the march the next day, and it's hard to explain because it's very surreal. You're walking down these corridors and alleys, and people are singing and they're dancing. And various countries are holding up signs as to who sponsored them or where they're from. And there's 8,000 people that are there. And there's another shot. And there's another, that was the United Kingdom, I believe. Next coincidence. The 2 gentlemen on either side of the elderly gentleman are pastors in Canada, and they were part of our trip. They had heard this gentleman speak in their home province and had hoped to invite him to one of their churches to speak. They'd never met him before. And here we are walking the streets of Auschwitz, and they ran into him. They connected, and he spoke at one of their churches about 3 months ago. This is a hard picture. This is a mother on the right and her 2 daughters. I want to get this right here. The woman on the far left, her name is Ori Migdish. Ori was a Gaza hostage. And she and her mother and her sister came to the march. You'll notice it says building or block 10. That's important because that's the building where they raped women and children before they murdered them. And I don't know how long they were there, but they stood there the entire time we were around there. I took this picture because this is a view of the railroad tracks under the bridge that we walked from Auschwitz to Birkenau. And the reason Poland was picked as the place to murder so many people was because of the vast railway system. And that's an example of how it was utilized by the Nazis. So now we're getting ready for the march, and you can see it's starting to get cloudy out. And people are milling around. And again, it's a very festive atmosphere. There are the boys and me holding an Israeli flag. You see some wooden paddles. We were each given wooden paddles, 8,000. And we were told to write whatever we wish and put those in the tracks. Those are the tracks being the ones that, from the Birkenau entrance to where the chambers were. A lot of them were similar. I wrote in Hebrew, Shalom, and I wrote in Hebrew, Ham Yisrael Chai, and then I wrote in English, Bring Them Home. And if you glanced at a lot of those, a lot of people had the same sentiment. This was at the end of the day. The entire line was filled with these paddles. The event itself was cut short. It was supposed to be an hour. It lasted only 10 minutes because of a torrential rainstorm. We all got soaked. Umbrellas were worthless. But to be honest with you, we all felt it was a blessing when we got back on the bus, because we just got a little taste of what it must have been for those that were actually there. It's the quietest bus ride I've ever been on in my life, because we just kept pondering. This is Treblinka. You don't see any buildings because, again, this was just a death camp, and this is the memorial that's been constructed there. I just put this slide in here because it's just so hard to comprehend. 11 and a half years for a minute for each soul that perished. So at the end of all this, we end up here on a Friday night service at a shul that was renovated. It was used by the Nazis as a horse barn. And the IDF choir led the service. I have never been to a service like this in my life, and I will never forget it. It was joyous. It was tearful. And it was moving. I can't begin to describe what it meant to all of us to be there. And you can see upstairs where the women sat. And the women took videos quietly, so I have some of those as well as part of the service. This is the museum in Warsaw, and most of it is about Jewish history. That is supposed to represent the parting of the Red Sea, and those windows, if you got close to them, they have names of people who've perished. There's some monuments here I want to show you that were part of this museum campus. This is a two-sided monument, and if you can notice, everybody's got their head down, they're walking one way, and a child is looking back. And that's to demonstrate going to death, and the child looking back, hoping that somebody will save them. The other side of the monument shows people in arms and strength. That's us today. I took a picture of this because this was a monument at Treblinka, and it's supposed to represent a gravestone that's been damaged, to represent what was damaged to Jewish life in Poland. 90% of Warsaw was destroyed by the Nazis. A lot of cemeteries got destroyed. A lot of Jewish culture, the buildings got destroyed. We happened upon a cemetery that was not, and this gentleman is Keith Hamada, and he and I have maintained contact. He is kneeling at the grave of his great-grandfather and great-great-grandfather. It was pretty moving for all of us. This is our group in front of the one of the walls at the Warsaw Ghetto. There are 2 walls that remain, and this was a day before we left. So we come back home, and we're trying to process all this. My flight went to Denver and then Omaha. Max's flight he was going to Chicago, so he was on a different flight. But I was with Nate because at the time Nate was living in Denver and still is, and now Max is in Denver. And on my flight, I'm wearing a Creighton shirt, and some guy down the aisle yells, "Hey, Creighton, you should know him," and points to somebody else. And I look at the guy and think, hey, he looks familiar, but I can't quite place him. And we're trying to process everything that we saw. As we're getting ready to land, I thought, that's Monsignor Gilg. And Monsignor and I were on a committee together for 15 years. He was the superintendent of the Archdiocese schools here in Omaha. And that was a blessing another coincidence that was a blessing, because we had a layover together, and he had just come back from Czechoslovakia, and he'd gone to a Holocaust site there. So I found myself processing some of my feelings with this Catholic member of the Catholic clergy, and he couldn't have been more helpful for me. But then this happened. And I don't know if all of you know their names. That's Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lashinsky, who were murdered outside that museum in Washington, D.C., roughly a month after we came home. Sarah's brother and Max are best friends. And while trying to process this trip, it was pretty difficult for us to try and process this. He spent the better part of a week with the family. And then, of course, after that, we had this. So one of my takeaways from this trip was we always say we remember them at Yiskor. And in my mind, I add now, we must remember them. We must never forget. And I'm going to close here. This is Hillel Zeitlin. At least 50 years ago, I discovered this poem in a prayer book, and I made a copy, and I've kept it ever since. He was a Jewish theologian, scholar, who ended up at the Warsaw Ghetto. And he was told that he was to leave on the next train, and he knew what would happen. So he laid tefillin, put on his tallis, and wrote this poem. So I'll close with this. Father, great and holy Father of all mankind, you create your child, the world, every instant. If for an instant you withdrew the gift of your creation, emptiness would replace it. You shower your children with blessing every moment. Once again, the morning stars appear, sing a song of love to you. Once again, the sun bursts forth, sing a song of light to you. Once again, angels sing of holiness to you. Once again, souls sing of yearning to you. And once again, grass sings of longing to you. Once again, birds sing of your joy to you. Once again, orphan nestlings sing of loneliness to you. And once again, a brook whispers its prayer. Once again, the afflicted pours out his complaint to you. Once again, his soul prayer splits your heavens. Once again, he trembles in awe of your glory. And once again, he hopefully awaits you. One ray of your light, and I am immersed in light. One word from you, and I am reborn. One hint of your eternal presence, and I am refreshed with the dew of youth. For you create everything anew. Father, please create me, your child, anew. Breathe into me of your spirit, that I may begin a new life. Thank you.